China's economy is on the brink of collapse. As companies from all over the world pull their investments from China, a large shadow hangs over the future of the world's second largest economy. China, which until pre-pandemic times was the manufacturing hub of the world, occupies a fickle position today. Several foreign businesses are redirecting their manufacturing operations to Mexico and India. If you're wondering how China got to this point, stick around till the end to have all your questions answered. We'll take a look at all the events that led to China's weakened economic position, why the US is moving manufacturing out of China, and whether or not there's still any hope for China. How did China's economy become the second largest in the world? Over the course of the past decades, China has seen great success in developing its economy. While it is true that the US is the largest economy in the world, the fact is that most American companies rely on Chinese manufacturing. What makes the Chinese financial crisis interesting is that in reducing their reliance on Chinese manufacturing, businesses are doing the impossible. Before the pandemic, it was an established principle of the global economy that China had a monopoly on manufacturing consumer goods. Businesses held the belief that no other country would ever be able to provide the conditions required to manufacture goods. Today, as an increasing number of companies flee China, what was then thought to be a fundamental fact of the global economy is changing. It would be helpful to keep in mind how the global economy changes. These changes help us understand the consequences of China's economic crisis and the implications that could have in the future. But for now, let's sift through the past. After the disastrous Great Leap Forward years from 1959 to 1961, China was in shambles, with the majority of its population well below the poverty line and a famine sweeping through the country. China lost millions of lives. Following 1976, and with a change in regime, China's economy needed a miracle. This miracle came in the form of a series of policies that aimed to give China's economy the push that it needed. Farmers and peasants were granted the right to farm their own land, resulting in a healthier population and economy. In 1979, the government allowed foreign investments in China. This immediately attracted the attention of several countries and foreign companies. In the same year, the US and China re-established their diplomatic and business relationship. Thus began a new, brighter dawn for the People's Republic of China. Companies, both in and out of the US, realized that China had a lot to offer them. With the massive availability of cheap labor, companies realized that they could manufacture much more cheaply in China than they could in the US. To put this into perspective, consider this statistic. When China first joined the World Trade Organization in 2001, the average Chinese worker's annual salary was around 9,333 yuan or 1,127 US dollars. Compare this to the average annual salary of a US worker in 2001, which was approximately $30,336. By moving their manufacturing operations to China, companies were paying 30% less for labor than in the US. China was especially enticing to companies who were on the lookout for increased profit margins. With China now a part of the World Trade Organization, the success of China's economy skyrocketed. With Chinese exports shipped globally, there was no home without a Chinese manufactured product. China's GDP grew, and with it, millions of people escaped poverty. As the world's companies flocked to China for manufacturing, forecasts stated that China's economy would continue to grow. In recent events, this has not been the case. So what went wrong? Before the COVID pandemic, economic forecasters thought that China's economy would continue to grow. After the pandemic, however, analysts believed that China would make a speedy recovery once COVID restrictions were lifted. Contrary to both of these predictions, China's economy still continues to be stuck in a slump. As more companies abandon their operations in China, the situation for the Chinese economy grows more volatile by the hour. The question begs to be asked, how can the world's second largest economy reach such a state? Well, the answer, as always, is pretty nuanced and complex. China's recent property and banking crises contribute to its stumbling economy, but there are more reasons at play here. For the sake of brevity, we will be looking at the three main reasons behind China's economic crisis. After we elaborate upon the causes of China's fumbling economy, we will then explain why U.S. companies are moving to India and Mexico. Number 1. U.S.-China trade wars. As successful as the Chinese economy has been in the past, it does not and cannot compare with the U.S. economy. As the world's largest economic presence, the U.S. wields a certain force in shaping the global economic landscape for the years to come. It does not bode well for China, then, to be locked in a trade war with the U.S. since 2018. In response to Chinese companies stealing U.S. intellectual property, the U.S. imposed tariffs on Chinese goods. These tariffs resulted in China implementing its own tariffs on U.S. goods. Since then, both these countries have been engaged in a trade war. As of today, this trade standoff between the two countries has resulted in around 66.4% of China's exports to the U.S. being subject to tariffs. The increased prices of Chinese goods caused U.S. consumers to minimize their business with China. Eventually, companies, too, turned to other, cheaper alternatives. Since 2018, China has seen an 8.5% decrease in its trade with the U.S., whereas the U.S. has reduced its trading with China up to a significant 26.3%. To understand the consequences that these tariffs have had on U.S.-China relations, consider this fact. Between 2014 and 2015, China was the U.S.'s primary trading partner, surpassing both Canada and Mexico. By 2019, however, these statistics had turned on their head, with both Mexico and Canada having done more trade with the U.S. than China. In addition to this ongoing trade war, China has been trying to change its economic focus. The Chinese economy is shifting from manufacturing toward consumption-led growth and foreign investments. This change brings another problem to the forefront. It makes clear the unreliability of the Chinese government. Number 2. The unreliability of the Chinese government. China's government has made it abundantly clear that it aims to increase the country's self-reliance. The strategic move to alter the Chinese economy's emphasis from manufacturing to foreign investments is a part of this aim. In the past, U.S. companies were drawn to China because of the favorable laws that allowed them to operate in the country. These favorable conditions culminated in U.S. companies enjoying access to a massive, low-pay workforce with little to no interference from the Chinese government. Given the present government's insistence on making China a self-reliant nation, President Xi Jinping has introduced policies that allow the government to meddle with businesses operating within its borders. One such policy, introduced this year, would directly impact all foreign businesses within China. Through a series of laws aiming at data security and anti-spying measures, the Chinese government would technically be able to seize a company's data assets and technology. In addition to these laws, a certain haze surrounds Chinese policies and practices moving forward. China has been known to take advantage of the unique position that it occupies as the manufacturing hub of the world, and, as the implementation of these new data security laws proves, businesses cannot rely on the Chinese government anymore. Foreign companies are uncertain about what Chinese laws and policies could entail for the future of their business, which makes China an increasingly unreliable country to operate in. Number 3. Massive spike in labor costs. A major component of China's appeal as a manufacturing haven was the vast availability of infrastructure and cheap labor. In the past, as companies flocked to China to set up their manufacturing operations, what happened was that the demand for labor increased. As the demand for cheap labor went up, so did the cost. Remember how earlier on in the video, we pointed out how in 2001, there was a 30% difference between the annual salary of a Chinese worker compared to an American worker? Well, things have changed significantly since 2001. A decade later, in 2011, Chinese workers made an annual wage of 41,799 yuan, or $6,120. In just 10 years, the average pay had increased up to 5 times for the Chinese worker. This meant that the gap between the American and Chinese workers' pay was decreasing. While there was still a significant gap between the Chinese and American pay scales, companies began to grow wary of the future. Data analysts and economists predicted that if China's labor costs continue to go up, businesses would see their profit margins be significantly narrowed down. Similarly, as the quality of life improves in China, it's only going to get much more difficult to find cheap labor. Presently, China faces a youth employment crisis. This is exemplified by the fact that young and educated Chinese citizens do not want to work in factories anymore, making minimum wage. As such, the prospects for the U.S. and other foreign companies in China don't look all that great. Why are U.S. companies moving to India and Mexico? This surge in labor costs has become a catalyst for the mass exodus of manufacturing from China. Companies are seeking refuge in countries like Mexico and India, where labor costs remain significantly lower. According to a study by the World Economic Forum, the move of manufacturing operations out of China is expected to create 1 million jobs in Mexico and 500,000 jobs in India by 2025. Furthermore, the escalating trade tensions between the United States and China have played a pivotal role in pushing U.S. companies away from China. The unpredictability of international relations has made it imperative for American businesses to diversify their manufacturing bases. Practically speaking, spreading risks across different countries cushions the impact of trade disputes. Mexico and India, with their stable trade policies, have become safe harbors for U.S. companies. As stated before, these companies aim to reduce the risks of manufacturing in China. Is there any hope for China? As we said earlier, the global economic landscape is always susceptible to change. Perhaps China will bounce back from its slumping economy. Or perhaps companies will steer a new dawn of globalized manufacturing. Either way, only time can truly tell us what the future of the economic landscape will look like. For now, we may only make educated guesses about China's economic role. How do you think this shift will impact the global economy in the long run? Share your insights in the comments below. And as always, we'll be reporting on how this situation plays out. Thanks for watching, and make sure to keep an eye out for our next video.